This video is disseminated by Rocket Doctor AI. Welcome to Stock Therapy with Penny Queen. Today I have Dr. Essam Hamza, CEO of Rocket Doctor AI. Welcome back.
Thanks, Penny.
All right, you've had a busy couple of months. You closed the Aaliyah Health acquisition. You raised $5.2 million. You signed more payer contracts, launched the Alberta CDSS pilot, picked up analyst coverage, all in the last 60 days. How do you prioritize when you're executing on so many fronts simultaneously?
Mhm. Yeah, no, it's been busy. It's always been busy, and you can see that from the press releases we have. But we have a great team, and what I pride myself on is getting the right people in the right positions, and spending the last literally 2 years since I joined the company as CEO to build that base and infrastructure of the right people in the right positions to be at the stage and which I think is an inflection point, and be able to handle the growth and at the speed that we think we can execute on.
All right. Well, you are now in network with over 13 million lives in the US, but revenue contribution stated back in November was less than 5%. So the US is clearly the biggest growth opportunity. Can you let us know what that fresh capital is earmarked for?
Yeah, again, this is not an overnight thing. And what's great about number one, the team, but also the acquisition we did last year of Rocket Doctor with Dr. Cherniak and so on, was that this is a 3-4 year process to get to this point. So the fact that they're in network now, with over 13 million patients is not an overnight thing. There's a large moat around it to get to this point with a lot of different stages. And now that we're at it, is as I mentioned, the inflection point, it is important to understand that it's about executing. How do you not just be in network with that many patients, but how do you get those patients onto the marketplace so that your customer, our customer, which is the doctor, is seeing more and more patients and using our software, and that's how we get the revenue increase. And so with the raise that we had, as you mentioned, it was upsized a couple of times from 3 million to 4.5 to 5.2. We have great shareholders and a lot of interest. We're able to kind of now allocate this very directly onto digital marketing spend and building out that marketplace, and bringing more and more patients onto it so that they can see our doctors, who in turn we charge at the end of each month.
All right. So I think you pretty much answered my next question, but you mentioned ramping advertising campaigns to the US. How's that going?
Great. Again, this is not an overnight one decision thing where you raise money and you spend it. It was actually built out on an infrastructure to get to this point where hired the right marketing team and the market leaders in the space with expertise, tested different solutions and different products in different markets to see kind of response, and we're at the point where we're always tweaking things, but I think the point is to effectively spend the money and getting the response that we hope we're going to be able to get here over the next few months. And as you said, November was our Q3 announcement. And so we really didn't spend much of anything in the US until this most recent quarter here, which is going to be a little bit in December, but really January on is really where we're focusing on the US growth.
Perfect. All right. So the raise was upsized twice from 3 million, 4.5 to 5.2. What does that tell you about investor demand?
Yeah, I mean, I think people hear AI a lot. They see it everywhere. Everybody's talking about it and how it's affecting their lives. And you see it on news channels, you see it on mainstream, you see it on business channels and so on. But what does it mean to the average person and the average investor, whether you can invest in it or not? And I think historically, all that money, or a lot of the money, has been tied up in companies that we don't tend to invest. If you're a mom and pop, the Nvidias of the world, or it really hadn't trickled down into the medium and small cap companies. And I think we're starting to see that shift now. We're starting to see a shift into smaller companies getting equity, getting interest. Again, we're in a very unique situation where we're a publicly traded company in the space, getting revenue and growing. And a lot of the companies that are raising capital right now at amazing valuations, like Open Evidence at $12 billion now, they doubled again their valuation recently, or Hippocratic AI, and so on. They're they're raising capital at very high valuations privately, with the anticipation, I'm assuming, that they're going to go public in the next 12 to 24 months, I'm assuming. So I think it's one of those things right now where um, we're starting to see a shift and a trickle down of investor interest into companies like ours that are able to convert the AI solutions into actually revenue producing, commercially viable things, which is really important because those products and those companies are a bit rare right now in AI space.
All right. The Can Health Alberta CDS pilot, it targets a 25 to 40% reduction in intake time. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, I think we've been pounding the table from the beginning about the global library of medicine, and we've been talking about the problem and the solution. Like, I think you never talk about a solution unless there's a problem that you can solve. And the problem has always been when you talk about supply and demand in healthcare. I've said this multiple times in different interviews. So it's about supply and demand. And the problem is you don't want to be spending more and more money in healthcare. We're already spending way too much money. In the States, it's over $5 trillion, I think it is right now. So the question is, how do you improve the supply and demand side of things? So either on the demand side, can you make patients healthier? Can you catch them earlier? Can you give them better access to care so that they don't get sicker and cost the system a lot more money and end up in hospital? And so triage them and see them at home instead, and so on, and make them compliant with their medication. And on the supply side, it's not about creating more doctors and churning out more doctors. The doctors are burnt out. They're spending 40 to 60% of their time, depending on the different studies, on administrative work, on paperwork and billing and credentialing and documenting and so on. So how do you fix that? And that's why we're talking about our solutions at Rocket Doctor AI, where we have solutions for the full patient journey from before the visit. So imagine again an AI nurse calling the patient to see what's wrong, why they want to see the doctor, and triaging them to see if they really need to go to a hospital or not. But then also documenting all that information for the doctor ahead of the visit, and maybe giving a differential diagnosis for the doctor, maybe a blood test that they should do ahead of the appointment, so it's much more efficient. Documenting the visit as well during the actual visit and recording it so the doctor is doing face to face versus typing away like crazy and documenting. And then after the visit, imagine checking up, the AI nurse checking up on your child on the antibiotics that they're on and if they're feeling better with their ear infection or whatever, and keep them out of hospital or catching things before it gets worse. And historically, that hasn't been available because of resources. And so if you're fixing the supply side and giving the doctor the ability to see more patients, spend more quality time with patients, provide better care and better access, then you're fixing that supply side without increasing costs. And so when you come back I answered a long way to answer back to the question, which is governments and payers around the world now are looking for solutions using AI and technology to improve access to care, improve efficiency. And Alberta, I think, is a leading force here in Canada for sure. But you're seeing things in the States too. I think, one of the recent developments was in Utah, where they signed a contract with a vendor where they now allow an AI doctor to talk to a patient who's on a chronic medication and see if they're needing a refill of their medication. And so, again, things where if it's low hanging fruit and you have certain safety nets, then you can kind of do that. And the great thing about our product is you don't have to have those very narrow guardrails. We have the ability to do a lot more than just that.
Right. Can you talk about the TMU partnership?
Yeah, no, it's exciting. I think again, whenever, and I've said this to you, Penny, but I think for the audience to understand, in any professional, like in medicine and medical school, and I'm sure other professions, the faculty really, really, really protect the students from any outside vendor or contamination or influence or bias, to the point where we can't talk to pharmaceutical companies or vendors and so on because they don't want us to be influenced by their propaganda or whatever it is. And so the fact that, in turn, like medical schools like University of Minnesota using our global library of medicine or TMU, partnering with us and literally giving us a stamp of approval to work with them and their students, the future doctors of the world, with our brand is a huge stamp of approval. I mean, it goes a long way to show that the trust um, the trust is there. And in medicine, that goes a long way, because it's very hard to get that foot in the door. And so this is the first foot that I think you'll see others, over time. But I think the key thing is that it's a big stamp of approval that medical schools are working with us, with their medical students, and us as their mentors or their providers.
Yeah, that's exactly how I see it. Every time I see those partnerships come out, it seems like it builds confidence in what you've actually created.
Yeah.
So I take those groups as being more expert on them than a lot of the more commercial
Yeah.
style of approvals. So,
Yeah.
you've said the who is right to highlight AI risks, but the Rocket Doctor is fundamentally different in its approach, with physician built, clinically governed AI versus opaque, hallucination prone systems. What specifically makes your approach safer?
Yeah, and I've mentioned this a few times before, that when you're looking at AI companies right now, let's call it as an investor, ask yourselves a few questions. Number one, ask yourself, do they have proprietary software? Like, is it theirs, or is it a fancy shell around ChatGPT, right? So is that information, is that software really proprietary to them? Number two, is it trustworthy? Is it accurate? And anybody who says, well, yeah, I mean, it's like 70% accurate, that's not good enough in medicine, right? You have to be pretty close to 100% accurate, or you can't be trusted at all. And so again, look at the numbers and look how it's clinically validated. And number three, can you keep trusting it, or is it going to change its answer, different times, and so on? And that's really important. And then finally, is it commercially viable? Is there a market for them to actually make money in the AI space? Because there's going to be a lot of great products out there. I can tell you that for a fact, as I see them, where they're fancy and they're cool, but the market's not going to pay for them, right? So there's no actual commercialized ability for them. And so I think at the end of the day, if you're an investor, you do that. That's really important. For us, what we did was we were able to use our network of almost, I think, 200 doctors over a period of about 8 years to build this global library of medicine, and validate all the information with our panel of doctors before it goes into the global library of medicine. It's a closed system, so it's never connected to the outside world. It can never be contaminated. It'll never hallucinate. It's always dependable on its answers, and it's clinically validated, like I said before, where we've tested it tens of thousands of times, but we've also used, like, again, medical schools are using it to test and train their medical students on their clinical skills. We've run it through medical study, or sorry, a medical exam, the OSCE exam, and it did extremely well, as well. So I mean, it's one of those things where we are always refining it too. So we also have a panel of doctors, including our chief medical officer, who's in charge of making sure that it keeps up to date, and that we keep testing it, and making sure that it's as accurate as possible. And that's the basis of a lot of our products that we can talk about.
All right. So now, with 89% gross margins and revenue growing, what is the biggest constraint on growth right now?
Yeah, I mean, if you asked me a month ago, I would have said money to execute, right? I mean, any small company on the markets, that's always the big thing, is do you have enough runway to execute on your business plan? And we've had a really successful raise here with great investors that have been very supportive from the beginning, and continue to grow their positions, which is great. So money is not the short-term issue right now. As a disclaimer, you always have to talk about money, and you can always run out of money. So that's something we always have to be aware of as an investor. But having said that, it does give us the runway now to start executing. As I mentioned before, the digital marketing spend in the US really is kicking in now, and the fruits of that labor, hopefully we'll be able to start talking about once we announce Q1, and that's coming in the next few months here. So I think that's the exciting thing for an investor, is that you saw all the hard work that went into it, all the news releases, all the infrastructure that was built up to be able to handle that growth, and that just creating a really big base of information and contracts and marketplace and doctors and software and all our team so that we can handle the growth. We have the capacity to handle the next phase, which is the growth phase for us.
All right. Well, what should investors be watching for over the next 6 months?
I think about execution. I always say this about any company. It's great to say anything you want about how exciting your company is or your product is, but are you executing on your promises? And so, that's something that internally as a team we really focus on is, we don't give projections externally, but internally, we hold ourselves up to high standards, and we have certain goals in mind in terms of our growth. And so we are looking towards making sure that we execute. And so it's not good enough to say that we have access to 13 million patients in network. What does that mean? How many of those are actually being seen by the doctors? How many doctors are on the platform using it? And in turn, we're going to see the revenue growth on that trickle down. So it's about execution at this point over the next few quarters, and that's the exciting part.
All right. Well, I am excited to be here and to watch. I know so much has gone into this up to this point, and to see so much movement and so much accomplished in such a short time is really exciting for me as an investor. So thank you for joining me, and I can't wait for our next update.
Thanks, Penny.
Thank you.